So there's a lot of language that follows through from the Data Protection Act. One of the most important roles is the data controller, and that's anybody who defines how we're going to use data, who gathers data, and is ultimately in control of that data. And then there's a data processor, who is somebody that uses the data on behalf of the data controller. So under the Data Protection Act, there's been very little regulation of the data processor, but under the GDPR, this changes monumentally and passes certain obligations onto the data processor that they've never had to deal with previously. They're going to have to define exactly how they're using data, how it's going to be stored, and they'll be subject to similar fines systems to the data controller.
So that's a really important point, right? Because up until the GDPR coming into binding effect, anyone that's listening that was working for a business supplying a service to a client where they were processing personal data on behalf of that client would say they're the controller and we're the data processor. And as a data processor, you want to be a data processor, right? Historically, this was a good thing because perversely, there was no real liability. There was no sting in the tail for being a processor. So the GDPR changes that. And what it says is, if you're defining the purpose and the means of the processing, you are a controller. And if you're a processor, you're simply then executing the wishes of the controller. But your liability is the same as the controller for that, essentially, for that processing that you do. So if you're in breach, if you're non-compliant, then there is responsibility. Have we defined with the controller and processor who is controller processor? What is our legal basis for this processing? And then enshrine that liability in the contract. So working with a lot of clients at the minute where that's entirely what they're doing. They're revising their current contracts through addendums to try and get that role of processor controller enshrined in law and the subsequent liability that falls from it.